The side door alarm went off just after 10 p.m. At first, Martin Holt thought it was nothing, a faulty sensor, maybe an animal. But when he stepped into the hallway, he saw someone moving through the dark. A boy, backpack on, slipping into a classroom like he still belonged there. Martin followed, ready to call security. But when the boy turned around, he didn't run. He just looked up and said, "I didn't do it." If this story hits you, please like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And if you've ever had to fight for someone no one else would, tell us in the comments. We read every one. The corridors of Westfield Middle School had always felt oddly serene after hours, as though the echoes of the daytime chatter settled into silence beneath the rows of lockers and the high ceilings. Martin Holt, the school's maintenance supervisor, never considered himself easily startled. He was the kind of person who found comfort in the stillness of an empty building, with only the hum of overhead lighting and the quiet drip of a distant faucet to keep him company. He'd long ago decided that a silent school was far preferable to the daytime rush of squeaking sneakers, slamming lockers, and the swirl of voices that seemed to reverberate through the halls. On a particular chilly autumn night, however, that sense of calm was shattered. Martin had been in his cramped office with the security screens flickering in front of him. After a decade in this role, he had come to trust that 99 out of 100 alarms were false or triggered by something benign. Raccoons were frequent culprits. They'd sneak in through vents or push open unsecured doors, setting off the building's motion detectors. Martin would chase them off with a bored wave of his flashlight, then return to the cracked vinyl chair that had molded to his shape over the years. But that night, just after 10, a beep from the central security panel alerted him that a side door had been opened. He glanced at the monitor and saw a flicker of movement in the hallway outside classroom 3B. Just a shadow, really. He tapped the screen trying to get a clearer image, but the camera feed glitched and pixelated. Another nuisance, he thought. The system was overdue for an upgrade, but budget cuts always seemed to delay improvements. He dragged himself up from the chair, dusted some chips off his shirt, his usual midnight snack, and headed out. The tall fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, reflecting off the polished floors. The place smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and that unique mix of chalk dust and stale cafeteria food that lingered even after thorough scrubbing. He breathed in, exhaling in a kind of resigned sigh. He'd done this routine so many times he could practically map every corner blindfolded. When he reached the side door, he found it ajar. No sign of forced entry. He looked around for footprints or scraps of fur, fully expecting to chase out another raccoon. Nothing. He turned on his flashlight and moved slowly, the beam casting long, dancing shadows. That was when he caught a glimpse of a figure, smallish, wearing a hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder, slipping into a classroom. Martin paused, heart quickening. It wasn't unusual for kids to try to break in on a dare, or maybe to retrieve a forgotten assignment. But still, it was enough to unsettle him. He made his way to the door of classroom 3B, ears alert to every scrape against the floor. He didn't want to spook the intruder into running, so he approached carefully, the quiet hush of the hallway magnifying every step. Through the narrow glass panel in the door, he saw the figure hunched at a desk, rummaging, or so he thought. But upon closer inspection, the kid wasn't rummaging at all. He appeared to be placing something inside. It looked deliberate, almost gentle, as though it was important to place it just so. Martin's throat went dry for a moment. This was an odd scenario. Why would anyone break into a school in the middle of the night to leave something behind? Gathering a bit of courage, Martin nudged the door open. It squeaked loudly enough for the boy inside to freeze, head swiveling in alarm. Martin clicked on the flashlight and directed it toward the desk. He expected the intruder to bolt, but the boy did nothing. He just stood there like a startled animal in headlights. Stepping forward, Martin said with all the authority he could muster, "All right, son, let's see those hands." The boy raised them slowly and Martin got a better look. 13, maybe 14 years old, fair hair peeking out from under the hoodie, a lean frame that suggested he'd shot up in height recently. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear or maybe some deeper emotion Martin couldn't interpret. Then the boy spoke 3 words, a defiant whisper that sent a chill up Martin's spine, though he couldn't explain why. "I didn't do it." It was such a strange thing to say. The quiet boy's voice trembled slightly. Not "don't hurt me," or "let me go," or even "I can explain." Just, "I didn't do it." Martin found himself momentarily speechless. Something about the boy's tone, the way he stood there almost resigned, made him feel that these words weren't about tonight at all. They were about something bigger, some hidden guilt or secret fear. For half a minute, Martin simply stared, unsure how to respond. Let's go, he finally said, motioning for the boy to move into the hallway. The kid complied, making no attempt to run. Together, they walked slowly out of classroom 3B. The overhead lights hummed, and Martin's flashlight beam slid across the floor as he guided the boy. "We're going to the office," Martin explained, hardly knowing what else to say. "We'll sort this out." The boy didn't reply. His head was bowed in a mixture of shame and quiet acceptance. Martin expected protestations or tears or at least some rattled explanation. Instead, the kid just walked as if he'd been anticipating this for a long time. When they reached the office, Martin dialed the school security officer, Frank Burris. Frank was technically an off-duty police officer who rotated through local schools to provide overnight coverage if anything major happened. He was at the far end of the building. While they waited, Martin asked the boy his name. "Logan," he said quietly, eyes still fixed on the floor. "Logan Madsen." Instantly, Martin felt a pang of recognition. That name prodded at his memory. He tried to place it. Madsen. The face was unfamiliar, but the name rang a bell. He rummaged mentally through thousands of students who had passed through the halls. Then it clicked. Logan had been a quiet 7th grader 2 years ago. Polite. Kept to himself. Martin remembered him because Logan used to come in early sometimes, helping pick up litter around the schoolyard. He'd even chat with Martin about mundane things, the best lunches in the cafeteria, the scariest teachers, small talk like that. Martin had liked him, he always seemed thoughtful. But then the kid had disappeared. Expelled, if Martin recalled correctly. Rumor had it he'd been caught pulling a fire alarm or something more serious. There had been an incident, though Martin couldn't remember all the details. A girl had been hurt in the locker room. The official story was vague, but as is typical in a small town, rumors abounded. Some said the girl had slipped and knocked herself out. Others whispered that someone had attacked her. In the end, Logan took the blame for the mischief, though Martin had never quite understood how or why. Frank Burris arrived a few minutes later, huffing from the long walk. He was a big guy in his 40s, with a bit of a belly that testified to his preference for donuts over rigorous workouts. He took one look at Logan and exhaled, "A kid? All right, let's get some lights on in here." They flicked on the overhead lamps, bathing the office in a harsh fluorescent glare. Dust motes danced in the air, swirling around the corners where the cleaning staff's vacuums never quite reached. The three of them stood there, Martin by the phone, Frank leaning against a desk, arms crossed, and Logan in the corner, his eyes refusing to rise above the floor. Frank started the questioning with a firm but not overly harsh tone. "So, Logan, right? Mind telling us what you were doing in classroom 3B this late?" For a moment, Logan said nothing. Then, in that same subdued voice, he responded, putting something back. "What something?" Logan hesitated. "A paper, a bracelet." Frank frowned, exchanging a quick look with Martin. It didn't make any sense. Why would you come in here in the middle of the night just to leave a piece of paper and a bracelet in a random desk? "It's not random," Logan murmured. "It's my old desk." That took Martin by surprise. He'd never heard of a kid feeling so attached to a desk that he'd sneak in to put something inside it. "Your old desk," he repeated. "That was from 2 years ago. You haven't been at this school since." Logan nodded, though his expression remained distant. Frank's frown deepened. "Son, breaking into the school is a serious matter. We'll have to call your parents. Maybe the principal too." Logan shrugged. "Do whatever you need to." Martin spoke up, wanting some clarity. "Logan, I remember you. You were quiet but a decent kid. You left this school right after that incident with the fire alarm. You remember that, don't you?" The boy's face tightened, a shadow of discomfort passing over it. "I remember," he said. Before Martin or Frank could press further, the assistant principal arrived. Her name was Miss Crawford, a slender woman in her 50s with sharp eyes behind a pair of thin-rimmed glasses. Her posture was always stiff, which made her come across as stern even if she was just saying hello. She looked from Martin to Frank, then at Logan. Her lip curled slightly, not in disgust but more in cautious frustration. She recognized Logan immediately, it seemed. "This is the boy," she said, directing her question at Frank. Frank nodded. "Logan Madsen," he confirmed. "He says he used to go here. We found him slipping into a classroom." Miss Crawford pursed her lips. "I remember him." She retrieved a file from the cabinet in the corner, flipping through the pages. "Yes, he was involved in a discipline issue a while back. Emotional problems. Instability. The recommendation was for him to be removed for the safety of other students." She paused, then gave Logan a once-over. "This is serious. We have zero tolerance for trespassing and other infractions. Logan said nothing. He just kept his head down, shoulders hunched. Martin felt a twinge of sympathy. The kid looked so alone. Still, the story behind that old incident remained fuzzy in Martin's mind. He was sure there was more to it than the official version let on. We might need to get his parents in here, Frank suggested. Don't see a point in calling the police about it unless we find reason. The boy says he came to drop something off. Miss Crawford nodded. I'll call them. Logan, you need to wait here until... But Martin, feeling a surge of curiosity, interjected. Before we do that, I found something in the desk. A folded piece of paper. Logan placed it there. I think we should look at that. Logan stiffened, but he didn't object. Miss Crawford lifted an eyebrow. What piece of paper? Martin went into the hallway and retrieved the drawing from the desk in classroom 3B. It was still there, folded exactly as Logan had left it. He brought it back, carefully unfolding it under the bright overhead lights. The page had a simple, childlike crayon drawing. Stick figures, 3 of them. The first had an X across it, presumably signifying someone who was hurt or maybe singled out. The other 2 stood nearby, one with a speech bubble that read, "Don't tell." On the right corner of the page was a small rendering of what looked like a locker room door, and next to it was a tiny bracelet drawn in colored pencil. No one spoke for a good 15 seconds. Miss Crawford and Frank exchanged glances, while Martin stared at Logan, waiting for an explanation. When none came, Miss Crawford cleared her throat. What is this supposed to mean, Logan? He spoke so quietly that they had to lean closer to hear. It's the truth, he said. Nobody ever wanted to see it before. Martin found the detail of the locker room particularly striking. A wave of recollection came over him. The incident from 2 years ago, the girl found unconscious in the girls' locker room, the pulled fire alarm. And Logan was right there. The cameras had glitched. He was blamed. Miss Crawford's expression hardened, but Martin detected a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. It was then that Frank asked, "Why now, Logan? Why come back after all this time just to leave this?" Logan's hand trembled as he pulled a small item from his hoodie pocket, a thin, worn bracelet with a single charm in the shape of a star. It looked scuffed, the shine long gone, but the significance was clearly deep. He held it out in his palm. "Because it's still mine," he said. "And it's hers. She dropped it that day. I kept it. It never felt right." Frank studied the bracelet warily. "Whose is it?" Logan didn't answer immediately. Then haltingly he said, "The girl who got hurt. I tried to help her, but everything got turned against me." He pressed his lips together in a thin line as if summoning courage. "I was forced to stay quiet. So, I did." Miss Crawford looked uneasy, flipping through the old file. "Logan, the official report was that you were caught in the hallway after the fire alarm was pulled. There was no mention of anyone else. The cameras were out, so we never got the full story. You wouldn't speak, not even to defend yourself, so we had no choice but to." "She was threatened," Logan interrupted, his voice trembling. "I was threatened. One of the boys on the soccer team, his dad's on the school board. He told me if I said a word, the girl would get hurt worse the next time." His eyes finally rose, and Martin saw raw anguish there. "You don't understand. They had power. They made me so scared I couldn't breathe." Miss Crawford's expression wavered, as though something in Logan's tone or the memory of the incident disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. But she glanced at the file again, at the notes about emotional instability. "Logan, we can't." "Can't what?" he snapped, surprising them with the sudden edge in his voice. "Can't question the powerful families? Can't imagine that I was telling the truth all along?" He looked like he was on the verge of tears, but his jaw was set in determination. "I didn't do it. I never touched that girl. I was there to help. But the other boy, he ran. He got away before anyone could see him. And I got blamed." He wiped the back of his hand across his eyes. "I thought if I kept quiet, maybe I'd protect her. I was a stupid kid, I guess." Silence settled in the office. Martin could practically hear Miss Crawford's mind racing. Logan's story, half-whispered in the fluorescent glare of the deserted school, had more weight than some mere teenage excuse. There was too much detail. The mention of the father on the school board, it tugged at something Martin had overheard once, about a big shot who used his position to keep stories buried. On top of that, the girl who'd been hurt had suddenly transferred schools without explanation, and the rumor mill died down suspiciously quickly. Martin recalled how everyone had seemed to just want the problem to go away. "We can't be sure of anything until we talk to more people," Miss Crawford finally said, though her voice lacked conviction. "If Logan was threatened, Why didn't he tell us or his parents at the time? Logan inhaled sharply. I tried to. But after a while no one wanted to listen. My mom was the only one who believed me. My dad left when I was 6. But she didn't have money or connections. She couldn't fight the board. At that, Miss Crawford closed the file. Her face wore a pained expression. All right. Frank, will you stay with Logan while I contact the principal and the board? We need to figure out how to proceed. Frank nodded. Martin watched Miss Crawford stride out of the office, her heels echoing on the tiled floor. Martin, for his part, felt unsettled. He picked up the folded drawing again, scanning its crude lines. A chill ran through him at the sight of the X over the first figure. The other two, one had a speech bubble, don't tell. Did that represent the bystander who saw everything? And the locker room door, plus the bracelet. All of it pointed to a hidden truth that might be uglier than anyone wanted to admit. Sighing, Martin turned to Logan, who was now sitting in one of the office chairs. The boy looked exhausted, maybe from more than just tonight. Possibly from 2 years of carrying this burden. Martin rubbed the back of his neck. Kid, if what you're saying is true, you've been done a great injustice. But it's late and I want to be sure you're safe. Logan glanced up and for a moment, Martin thought he saw gratitude in the boy's eyes, as though no adult had spoken kindly to him in a long time. Thanks, Logan whispered. I didn't know where else to go. I can't keep living with this. Frank, still leaning against a desk, let out a long breath. Well, let's see where this goes. I'm not passing judgment yet, but I've been around long enough to know there's usually more to the story than meets the eye. Martin nodded in agreement. He put a hand on Logan's shoulder lightly. We'll see this through. Whatever's in the dark eventually has to come into the light. 3 days later, Miss Crawford's inquiries had set something in motion, though exactly what was unclear. The rumor swirling around staffers was that the new principal, Dr. Felton, who had been hired after the old principal retired, wanted to re-examine Logan's case. Dr. Felton was known for being methodical, calm, and, unlike some administrators, not easily intimidated by political pressure. He'd built a reputation in previous districts for straightening out complicated situations, often shining a spotlight on areas that had been allowed to fester. Meanwhile, Martin found himself haunted by the memory of Logan's face. The boy had been picked up by his mother later that same night, leaving quietly, no fuss. Miss Crawford had told them not to speak about the situation to anyone, at least until they knew what was going on. But Martin couldn't let it go. He remembered how Logan used to help him in the mornings, how polite and shy he'd been. It was hard to imagine him as some delinquent who assaulted a fellow student. But that was the narrative the rumor mill had spun. Now the question gnawed at Martin: how had the truth gotten buried so quickly 2 years ago? Who had orchestrated it, and why had it been so easy to label Logan the culprit? The more Martin pondered it, the more uneasy he became. At the same time, across town, in a small, modest apartment, Logan sat on the edge of his bed, cradling that star charm bracelet in his hands. His mother, Clara Madsen, had just come home from her shift at the local grocery store. She stood in the doorway of Logan's room, face etched with worry. He hadn't told her the full details of his midnight venture at Westfield Middle, but she suspected enough to know it related to that awful incident from 2 years back. Logan, she said gently, stepping inside and sitting down beside him on the bed. Do you think this is really the best way to handle it? Sneaking in at night, confronting all this alone? He kept his gaze on the bracelet. They wouldn't listen any other way, Mom. I tried after it happened, remember? People kept telling me to be quiet, that it would go away. Then they threatened us. You were scared. She grimaced, nodding. I was. And I'm sorry if you felt like I didn't do more. But I had no resources, no clout. I went to a lawyer, but we couldn't afford the fees. All we got was a letter saying we disputed the expulsion, and it led nowhere. The father on the school board was too influential. Logan's voice quivered with old anger. He didn't want his son's involvement exposed. And the other boy, Damien, I think that was his name, he saw everything. He said he'd back up whatever story they told him to. So I ended up the scapegoat. She bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes. I know how hard it's been on you. Having to switch to a different school, losing your friends. But sneaking back, leaving that drawing? It could open wounds you've tried to heal. Logan looked at her, his eyes fierce. I'm tired of healing the wrong way, of swallowing the truth so someone else can go free. If it means we have to fight again, then we fight. Even if no one believes me, at least I'll know I tried. Clara brushed a hand through his hair, her heart aching at the resolve in her son's face. He was still just a boy, yet he carried a burden far too heavy for his years. She remembered that day vividly, Logan coming home, pale as a sheet, refusing to speak for hours. Then the phone calls from the school, the accusations. The shame and fear that enveloped them. She'd done what she could, but it hadn't been enough. Now she wondered if this new principal might offer some hope. "All right," she said softly. "If Dr. Felton or whoever calls me, I'll speak my mind. We'll do this together. But please, promise me you'll be careful. I can't stand seeing you hurt again." Logan nodded, swallowing hard. "I promise." Days turned into a week. The hush around the school about Logan's reappearance was near total. Martin, going about his usual routines, could sense something shifting beneath the surface. Miss Crawford was tight-lipped, offering only that the situation was under review. Frank, the security officer, had said nothing more, only giving Martin a shrug and "The principal's taking this upstairs, I guess." One afternoon, Martin found himself repairing a squeaky door hinge in the faculty lounge. As he worked, he overheard two teachers discussing rumors about the old incident. "I heard they're looking into that fiasco with the locker room from years ago," one said in a hushed tone. "Something about new evidence?" "New evidence?" repeated the other teacher. "I thought that Logan kid admitted guilt." "No, he never did," the first corrected. "He was just expelled." But apparently the old principal had some kind of agreement with a board member to keep things quiet. Martin's hands trembled slightly as he tightened the last screw. That confirmed his suspicion. There had been a cover-up, or at least a hush-hush arrangement. It rankled him that a decent kid might have been sacrificed for someone else's interests. Though he hated drama, Martin felt a moral tug to see the truth come out. Later that day, Miss Crawford summoned Martin to a private meeting in the main office. When he arrived, Dr. Felton was there too. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, in his 50s perhaps, with salt and pepper hair and an air of calm authority. He gestured for Martin to sit. "I appreciate you coming," Dr. Felton said, his voice measured. "Miss Crawford tells me you were the one who initially found Logan Matson in the building. I understand you also discovered the drawing in classroom 3B. "Yes, sir," Martin replied. He was placing it in his old desk. Dr. Felton leaned forward. "I want you to tell me everything you observed. No detail is too small." Martin recounted the night, the alarm, the side door, discovering Logan, the boy's insistence that he didn't do it, and how he placed the drawing along with a bracelet in the desk. Dr. Felton listened quietly, hands folded on the desk, occasionally nodding. When Martin finished, Dr. Felton pressed a button on the phone. "Send him in," Dr. Felton said into the receiver. A moment later, the door opened, and in stepped the school security officer Frank. He greeted Martin with a nod and sat down. Dr. Felton clasped his hands. "Frank, Miss Crawford and I have been reviewing the old files. We've also looked at the statements from the time of the locker room incident. The records are inconclusive. There are mentions of a second boy near the scene, but it was never followed up. The cameras were out that day, so no footage exists. The victim, a girl named Bethany Carter, was found unconscious. She transferred out of the district soon after." Dr. Felton's expression darkened. The father of one of the soccer team boys, Ryan Pierce, was indeed on the board at the time. That boy's friend, Damien, gave a statement claiming Logan was the only one there. But there's no actual evidence linking Logan to the girl's injury, just circumstantial presence in the hallway. Miss Crawford nodded. "Yes. And for some reason Logan refused to say anything, not even to defend himself. He simply clammed up. The official reason for expulsion was that he posed a risk to the student body." Martin felt a burst of frustration. "Logan told me he stayed silent because he was threatened. The boy who really hurt Bethany had connections. That father on the board." Dr. Felton exhaled. "So it seems? If that's the case, it points to a possible cover-up." He glanced at Miss Crawford. "We've reached out to Miss Carter, the victim, to see if she's willing to speak about what happened. So far, no response. But we'll persist." Martin nodded, relieved that the administration was taking this seriously. "If that's the path you're on, how can I help?" "We need your honest testimony about Logan's demeanor that night," Dr. Felton said. "We also want to keep an eye out for any potential interference from the families involved. I'm not blind to the political ramifications. If a board member covered up his son's wrongdoing, you can bet there will be pushback." Frank cleared his throat. "I'll just say that from a law enforcement standpoint, this is a big deal. If we find evidence that Logan was framed, it means the real culprit's still out there. And there could be legal consequences for those who suppressed the truth." Miss Crawford fidgeted, looking a bit anxious. "I'm worried about retaliation. The father, Mr. Pierce, still holds influence in the community, even though he's no longer on the board as of last year. He stepped down for unrelated reasons, but his connections remain strong. Dr. Felton's eyes hardened. Let him try. We've got to do the right thing. The well-being of our students is paramount. It was the first time Martin felt genuine hope that justice might be served. This principal, unlike the last, seemed unafraid of confrontation. Martin left the office that day determined to play whatever part he could, even though a nagging worry gnawed at him about potential blowback from powerful people. Over the next few weeks, the tension around the school escalated. Subtle but telling signs emerged. A hush fell among certain staff when Dr. Felton's name came up. Whispers circulated that a scandal might break soon, stirring local media interest. Martin even heard rumors that the old principal, retired though he was, might be questioned about how the original investigation was handled. But the biggest development came when Bethany Carter finally responded to Dr. Felton's inquiries. She agreed to meet privately. She was in high school now, nearly 16. Though not at Westfield's feeder high school, she was still within driving distance. Martin heard the news secondhand from Ms. Crawford, who seemed relieved yet nervous about what revelations might come to light. Martin didn't know if Logan had been informed, but word would likely reach him soon. Meanwhile, Logan tried to keep his life as normal as possible. He attended a different middle school across town, an arrangement that had been forced upon him after his expulsion. He was used to the sideways glances. Some kids whispered about him, repeating stories of how he was rumored to have caused that girl's injury. But he remained mostly quiet, focusing on surviving each day. He had few friends. Many parents didn't want their children associating with someone rumored to be dangerous. It was lonely, but he'd learned to endure. One afternoon in his new school's library, Logan's phone vibrated. He hesitated because cell phone use wasn't allowed during school hours, but he recognized the name that flashed on the screen, Dr. Felton. Heart pounding, he discreetly stepped behind a bookshelf and answered in a hushed voice. Hello. Logan, this is Dr. Felton from Westfield. I hope you don't mind me calling you directly. Logan's throat felt tight. No, it's okay. Listen, Bethany Carter has agreed to speak with me. She's the girl from the incident. I'm going to meet with her in a couple of days. I wanted you to know. Logan exhaled, a surge of relief and fear coursing through him. That's good, I guess. Dr. Felton's tone softened. I understand this might be overwhelming, but it's an important step toward clarifying what really happened. I thought you'd want to be informed. Yes, sir. Thank you. When the call ended, Logan felt a swirl of emotions. Relief that finally the girl might confirm the truth. Terror that if she refused or contradicted him, he'd be right back where he started. That night he told his mother the news. She embraced him, tears in her eyes, promising they'd face whatever came next together. In a tense meeting on a Thursday evening, Dr. Felton sat in his office with Bethany Carter. She was taller than she'd been at 13, with longer hair and a guarded expression. She'd brought her mother, who hovered protectively. Ms. Crawford was present to take notes. The office felt small and claustrophobic as the group settled, the fluorescent lights highlighting every subtle shift of posture. Dr. Felton began gently. Bethany, thank you for coming. I understand this may be difficult, but we want to ensure that any past wrongdoing is properly addressed. She nodded, looking at her mother, who gave a reassuring squeeze of her hand. It's okay, Bethany said quietly. Could you tell us what you remember about the day you were found unconscious in the girls' locker room at Westfield? Bethany's gaze dropped to her lap. When she spoke, her voice trembled. I remember going to the locker room after PE. I stayed behind because my ankle was hurting. My friend had gone ahead. Then, a boy followed me in. I didn't recognize him at first. He was older, maybe on the soccer team. He said something like, "What's wrong? Need help walking." But the way he said it felt off. She paused, swallowing nervously. He came closer. I felt creeped out. I told him to go away and he laughed. Then I slipped. I'm not sure if I was pushed or if I lost my balance. My head hit the bench. I remember feeling a sharp pain. After that, everything went dark. Bethany's mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Dr. Felton leaned forward. When you regained consciousness or later, were you ever approached by anyone about what happened? Bethany's face pinched in confusion. I woke up in the nurse's office. Then the principal and a couple of teachers were there, telling me I'd fainted or something. I told them I didn't faint. I said a boy was there. But they asked if I was sure. I started to doubt myself because it all happened so fast and I had a concussion. My parents pulled me from the school soon after that, especially when the rumors about an attack started. My father was furious that they didn't investigate, but he traveled a lot, and Mom was worried I'd be teased or worse, so we just left. Miss Crawford frowned. Do you recall seeing Logan Matson at any point? Bethany shook her head slowly. I remember hearing the fire alarm before I blacked out. That's about it. But after I got home and saw the news that a boy named Logan had been expelled, I didn't recognize the name. I just assumed the school found him responsible. Dr. Felton glanced at Miss Crawford, then back at Bethany. Logan claims he saw the soccer team boy follow you, that he pulled the fire alarm to get people's attention because he was afraid you were in danger. Does that ring true at all? Bethany thought for a moment, brow furrowed. If there was another boy there, I never saw him. But that doesn't mean Logan wasn't trying to help. I really don't know. But I certainly never saw Logan in that locker room with me. The boy who cornered me was bigger, broader shoulders, and he laughed in this mean way. I didn't see his face clearly before I fell. Her mother spoke up, voice thick with emotion. Bethany was traumatized. We asked the school to investigate, but we got so much pushback. And then we heard about the expulsion of some other boy, so we assumed maybe it was taken care of. We never got any closure. Dr. Felton let out a silent exhale. Thank you for being honest. One more thing, do you recognize this bracelet? He slid the star charm bracelet across the desk. Bethany's eyes widened. She picked it up with trembling fingers. I thought I lost this the day I fell. It's mine. My grandma gave it to me. I had no idea. Why do you have it? The principal exchanged glances with Miss Crawford, who was scribbling notes. Logan returned to the school recently to put that bracelet in his old desk. He claimed he picked it up when he found you unconscious, that it was proof you were there, as was he. Tears slid down Bethany's cheeks. So he was there, she murmured. He must have tried to help me. Why else would he take my bracelet and keep it all this time? If he hurt me, why return it now? She gave a determined sniff. I want to know the truth. Dr. Felton nodded. So do we? Thank you for coming. This helps us immensely. If you're willing, we might need you to speak to the school board or even law enforcement if it comes to that. Is that something you're prepared to do? Bethany hesitated, then looked to her mother, who nodded. We will, her mother said firmly. I don't want Bethany scared or silenced any longer. And if Logan was wronged, he deserves justice too. As word spread that Bethany remembered a different boy in the locker room, older, broader-shouldered, attention swiftly turned to the soccer team from 2 years prior. Though the rosters had changed, Miss Crawford was able to identify who had been on that team. A name quickly surfaced, Ryan Pierce. He was known for his father's influence on the school board. Ryan was now in high school, a star athlete. Then there was Damien, another former soccer player, who might have been the second boy in the drawing. The rumor in the teacher's lounge was that these two had a tight friendship, thick as thieves. The new principal quietly asked around about Ryan's father, Mr. Pierce. He was, indeed, a powerful figure in the community involved in real estate and local politics. Old notes from the previous administration hinted that Mr. Pierce had pressed the school to handle the incident quickly and quietly. The official line was that Logan was to blame for pulling a false fire alarm, which contributed to the confusion around Bethany's injury. That alone seemed flimsy as a reason to expel him, but apparently no one had fought it hard enough, some out of fear, some out of complacency. Dr. Felton realized that if he publicly reopened the case, he might face a backlash. But he also felt compelled to do so for the sake of truth. He consulted with the district's legal counsel, ensuring he had the authority to investigate events from a previous administration. The legal counsel confirmed he did have that power, though he should proceed cautiously. Meanwhile, Miss Crawford reached out to Logan's mother, Clara, asking if Logan would provide a formal statement. Clara agreed, albeit nervously. She feared retaliation from the Pierce family. But Logan insisted. They set a date for him to come to Westfield's administrative offices after school hours, to meet with Dr. Felton, Miss Crawford, and the district's council. It was a big step. Logan would be forced to relive that day in painstaking detail. Martin, curious and concerned, felt the tension growing daily. He and Frank, the school security officer, would occasionally exchange updates. Frank had heard that Dr. Felton was preparing to confront Mr. Pierce or at least contact him for a statement. But no one knew how the powerful man would react. Perhaps he'd deny everything or threaten lawsuits. One crisp afternoon, Martin was sweeping leaves from the school's front entrance when he saw a boy standing at the edge of the parking lot. Hoodie up, posture tense. It was Logan. He looked torn about whether to enter. Martin set aside the broom and walked over. Hey, he said gently. You here for that meeting with Dr. Felton? Logan nodded, eyes darting nervously. My mom's parking the car. I just needed a moment. Martin offered a comforting smile. I get it. You're probably feeling a lot of pressure. Logan swallowed, looking at the building that had once been his middle school. Sometimes I hate this place, he admitted, voice trembling. But part of me still remembers good things like the teacher who let me read during lunch or the old principal praising me for helping pick up trash once. Now it just feels heavy. Martin patted the boy on the shoulder. You'll get through this. You're strong. And you're doing the right thing. Before Logan could reply, his mother joined them, giving Martin a grateful nod for his kindness. Together they walked inside, the automatic doors sliding open with a faint hiss, letting them into the bright hallway leading to the administrative offices. The meeting room was a modest conference space with a long table and a half-dozen chairs. Logan sat at one end, flanked by Clara. Dr. Felton and Ms. Crawford sat opposite, while a district lawyer, Ms. Renfield, sat to the side. Logan's heart raced, recalling the last time he'd been in a room like this. Only then it was the old principal, a guidance counselor, and a police officer demanding answers about the fire alarm. He'd felt so helpless, so cornered, especially after Mr. Pierce glared at him from across the table, silent threat blazing in his eyes. This time, though, Mr. Pierce wasn't in the room, and Dr. Felton's calm presence was reassuring. When Ms. Renfield asked if Logan was comfortable proceeding, he nodded, though his palms were sweaty. All right, Logan, she began gently. Tell us in your own words what happened that day 2 years ago. He took a shaky breath. I was heading out of the locker area after gym class. I heard voices. One was Bethany's. She sounded upset, maybe in pain. I looked around the corner and saw a boy. From the soccer team, I think. He was leaning over her. She was on the ground or half fallen. I panicked. I'd heard rumors about some guys on the team picking on girls, but I never saw it firsthand. So I pulled the fire alarm to get help, because my phone was in my backpack in the main hallway. He paused, collecting himself. I heard Bethany's head hit something, like a bench. Sounded bad. The boy looked at me wide-eyed, then he ran. I rushed over to Bethany. She was unconscious, not moving. I saw her bracelet on the floor. It was shining under the fluorescent light. I picked it up. Then, before I knew it, staff came running in response to the alarm. They found me with her. The cameras were out that day, so no proof of anything. The next thing I remembered, the principal was blaming me. He said I was the only one there. That the alarm was a prank. I tried to say something, but then Mr. Pierce, Ryan's father, came into the office. Logan's hand clenched on the table. Clara rubbed his shoulder. He told me if I said anything about Ryan or Damien, Bethany would be in more danger. He said I had no evidence. He threatened my family. I was just a kid and I was terrified. So, I kept my mouth shut. I said I pulled the alarm, but I wouldn't say why. He looked at Dr. Felton, tears in his eyes. I didn't think anyone would believe me anyway. A quiet hush filled the room. Ms. Renfield made notes, her expression grave. Dr. Felton tapped a pen against the table. Logan, do you know for sure it was Ryan Pierce? Could it have been Damien? Logan considered. I saw Ryan's face as he ran out. The light was bright and he passed right under it. I recognized him. He was a star on the soccer team, wore jersey number 7. Damien was also on that team, but I think he was standing in the hallway. He must have seen or heard something. He was the second figure in my drawing. The one saying, "Don't tell." Ms. Crawford interjected softly. So the "don't tell" was Damien's line? Logan shrugged. He whispered it as he ran by me like a warning. Or maybe that was part of the threat. I'm not certain. But I remembered it so vividly that I drew it. Silence again. Then Ms. Renfield said, "This is serious. If true, it suggests Ryan Pierce attacked or at least harassed Bethany, then fled. If Mr. Pierce, his father, coerced you into silence, that's grounds for multiple legal inquiries." Clara spoke up, voice shaking. We wanted to fight at the time, but we had no money. Our only source of income was my job. We were told lawyers would be expensive, that we'd have to prove everything. Logan had no proof except the bracelet, and even that wasn't conclusive. We were powerless. Dr. Felton nodded sympathetically. Well, times have changed. I'm going to push this forward to the board and local authorities, but carefully. We need to gather as much evidence as we can. We have Bethany's statement, Logan's statement, and the fact that the father was on the board at the time. With enough testimony, we can build a case. Logan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. For the first time in 2 years, he felt like someone was truly listening, not just dismissing him as a troubled kid. It was both empowering and terrifying. "Thank you," he managed. "All I want is the truth." In the weeks that followed, events began to spiral. Dr. Felton arranged a discreet meeting with Mr. Pierce, who showed up with his own lawyer. The tension was palpable in the small boardroom. Mr. Pierce denied everything. He insisted Logan was a disturbed child who had fabricated a story to cause trouble. He threatened defamation suits if the school pursued the matter. Dr. Felton stood firm, stating that new evidence warranted a re-examination. Pierce's lawyer repeated that there was no proof, that the cameras had conveniently been out, and that Logan had never spoken up before. At the same time, Martin noticed a change in the school's atmosphere. Staff members were whispering about possible lawsuits. Some were worried about the reputation of Westfield Middle if a scandal broke. Martin picked up bits and pieces of conversation suggesting that certain board members were nervous about their own roles in approving the old principal's handling of the incident. Even parents started asking questions. A local gossip blog posted an article titled, "Dark Secrets at Westfield? Old Locker Room Injury Resurfaces." Comments ran the gamut from supportive of Logan to calls for him to move on and stop stirring trouble. Logan, still at his new school, became anxious. Whispers reached him that Ryan Pierce, now in high school, was furious. Ryan's father was known to be vindictive. Logan worried about retaliation both at home and online. His mother reassured him they'd seek help if anything threatening happened. For a while nothing did. But the tension weighed heavily on them. Then one night, Martin was closing up the school when he heard a faint hiss of aerosol paint. He followed the sound to the back of the building near the dumpsters. There, in the dim glow of a distant street lamp, he saw two silhouettes. They were spraying graffiti on the wall. As soon as Martin shouted, they bolted. He only caught a glimpse of one of them, a teenage boy with broad shoulders, a hoodie pulled low. Martin managed to see part of the graffiti, a crudely scrawled message, "Liar Logan." Next to it was a star symbol crossed out. Martin's heart pounded. Someone was sending a message, likely Ryan or one of his friends trying to intimidate Logan or anyone who supported him. Martin reported it to Frank and they took pictures. The next day, Dr. Felton saw the vandalism and shook his head in dismay. He had the custodians paint over it, but the memory lingered. Dr. Felton pressed forward. He reached out to local law enforcement to request a fresh look at the incident report. He provided them with Bethany's new testimony, Logan's statement, the bracelet, and the suspicious circumstances of the camera outage. The police, somewhat reluctantly, agreed to investigate. Meanwhile, the district's lawyer prepared to clear Logan's old disciplinary record if sufficient evidence showed he was wrongfully accused. But the real tipping point came when Damien, whose last name was Sutter, got involved. He was the second boy in the drawing, the one who had stood by and said, "Don't tell." Rumor had it he'd left the soccer team the following year for personal reasons. Now a 10th grader, he apparently had a falling out with Ryan Pierce. No one knew the details, but Ms. Crawford heard from a teacher at the high school that Damien had been struggling with guilt. Finally, Damien stepped forward. Through a quiet phone call to Dr. Felton, he confessed that Ryan had threatened him too, told him to keep his mouth shut about what happened in the locker room. Damien admitted he'd witnessed Ryan corner Bethany, that he saw her slip or get pushed, and that Logan had pulled the alarm. Damien felt terrible for his silence and wanted to set the record straight, especially now that Ryan seemed to be lashing out again with vandalism and threats. This was the breakthrough. With Damien's testimony, the school and law enforcement had a direct witness. The accusations against Ryan Pierce were no longer just Logan's word. Damien, who had once supported Ryan's cover-up, now verified Logan's story almost detail for detail. The conflict reached a boiling point one crisp autumn evening when the school board held a special session to address the matter. Word spread, and a small crowd gathered at the administration building. Teachers, parents, even a few local reporters came to see what would happen. Martin stood off to one side, keeping a watchful eye, ready to provide testimony if called. Dr. Felton and Ms. Renfield were inside, preparing to present findings. Logan and Clara waited anxiously in the hallway, unsure if they'd be asked to speak. Mr. Pierce arrived with his lawyer. He scowled at Logan, then at Dr. Felton. Tension crackled in the air. The board members, some of whom had been around 2 years ago, looked uneasy. They knew that if the cover-up was exposed, it would reflect badly on them too. Ryan wasn't present, presumably on the advice of his father's lawyer. The meeting began behind closed doors, but word soon leaked that it was a heated affair. Mr. Pierce threatened lawsuits, defamation claims, and more. He accused Logan of being a problem child, demanded to know why the school was dragging my family's name through the mud based on unsubstantiated rumors. Dr. Felton calmly presented the new evidence. Bethany's testimony that a different boy had confronted her, the star charm bracelet, Logan's consistent statements, and most critically Damien's confession that Ryan had been in the locker room, not Logan. By the time the board emerged from the private session, Mr. Pierce was red-faced and storming off. Some of the board members looked shaken, others relieved. They made an official announcement that, due to new evidence, the old disciplinary action against Logan was vacated. They also announced that a request would be made to law enforcement to investigate possible assault charges against Ryan Pierce, as well as any wrongdoing by his father. The father, in the meantime, was asked to remove himself from any pending district committees or volunteer positions. In short, everything that once seemed locked away in secrecy was being hauled into the light. Logan's shoulders shook with relief when Dr. Felton personally informed him that his name had been cleared. Clara hugged him, sobbing softly. Martin, watching from a few feet away, felt a surge of satisfaction for the kid who had carried a weight far too heavy for his young age. Yet he also noticed Logan's anxious glance toward the parking lot, as if expecting retaliation from Mr. Pierce. The next day, an article appeared in the local newspaper, "Former Student Vindicated in Locker Room Incident, Allegations Point to School Board Cover-Up." It detailed how Logan Madsen had been expelled for pulling a fire alarm, only to have new testimony show he was, in fact, trying to save an injured girl. It also hinted that the father of a star athlete had manipulated the investigation to protect his son. Though no one was named outright, pending official charges, the references were obvious to those in the community. Public opinion began to shift. Many were outraged that an innocent kid had been blamed. Others expressed shock that the old principal and board members had closed ranks to protect the wealthy. Some were reluctant to believe the allegations against Ryan Pierce, certain he was a model student and talented athlete. But the tide of evidence was strong, especially with Damien's statement. Ryan found himself suspended from his school, and juvenile charges were being discussed. The local prosecutor's office was reviewing the case, though there were complications due to the time elapsed. Meanwhile, Bethany's father, though absent from the public eye, sent a letter of thanks to Dr. Felton for finally addressing what he felt had been mishandled years earlier. He expressed hope that the truth would help Bethany move on from the trauma she'd carried. In the midst of all this, Martin noticed that Logan started appearing outside Westfield Middle after school, just standing near the building. One afternoon, Martin approached him with a wave. "Hey, you okay?" Logan shrugged, casting his gaze toward the front entrance. "I don't know. I was thinking, maybe I could come back. For real. Not that I have to or anything, but this was my school once." Martin smiled kindly. "You always have a place here if you want it." Logan swallowed hard. "I guess I just wanted to see if it still felt scary. Doesn't, not as much. More like, sad. But I'm glad the truth is finally out." Martin put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I am too, kid." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the school lawn. Then Logan asked quietly, "When the board meets again, do you think they'll let me re-enroll if I want to?" Martin nodded. "It's a possibility, but only if you're comfortable. No one will force you to come back here. We just want you to have the choice." Logan exhaled, relief mingled with the lingering sorrow of what he'd lost. "Thanks." In the days that followed, the final puzzle pieces slid into place. With Bethany's reaffirmed statement, Damien's confession, and Logan's account, the local prosecutor had enough to file juvenile charges against Ryan Pierce, assault or at least reckless endangerment. There was also talk of filing charges against Mr. Pierce for intimidation and possibly conspiracy to obstruct. Though legal proceedings would take time, it was a monumental shift from the silent hush that had once surrounded the case. The school board, under public pressure and Dr. Felton's firm guidance, issued a formal apology to Logan and his mother, acknowledging the failure of the previous administration to properly investigate the incident. They also cleared his academic record of any wrongdoing. That apology was printed on official school letterhead, a small but symbolic gesture of restitution. Many staff who remembered Logan as the quiet but kind boy felt vindicated. The teacher who once wrote that glowing report about Logan came out publicly, saying she'd always doubted the official story. Martin, in quiet moments, felt a sense of pride that he'd played a small role by confronting Logan in the hallway that fateful night and choosing not to dismiss his strange behavior. When the dust finally began to settle, Logan decided to visit the school once more. He didn't come at night, nor did he try to hide. He simply walked in through the front doors around the time classes let out, accompanied by his mother. Martin happened to be in the hallway. He greeted them with a wave. Students jostled by, talking and laughing, paying little attention to the boy who'd once been ousted. They headed to Dr. Felton's office, where Ms. Crawford was waiting. She offered Logan a measured smile. "I hear you might want to re-enroll for the remainder of your middle school term. Is that correct?" Logan glanced at his mom, then nodded. "I think so. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but if there's space, I'd like to try." Dr. Felton spoke with gentle warmth. "There is space. We'll make it happen. You'll have to speak with the guidance counselor about your schedule, but we'll ensure a smooth transition. No more hush-hush. You have our support." Logan managed a small smile, though his eyes glistened. Clara squeezed his shoulder. For so long, they had been ostracized by the rumor that Logan was dangerous. Now they were being welcomed back. It felt surreal. Bittersweet. "Thank you," Logan said. "I'm ready." In the aftermath, life didn't magically become perfect. Ryan Pierce's case wound through the juvenile court system, with his father trying every legal trick to lessen the repercussions. Damien faced scrutiny for his initial false statements, but the authorities were lenient, given his subsequent honesty. Bethany, though still haunted by the memory, finally felt validated. She reached out to Logan via email, expressing gratitude that he'd told the truth, that he'd held onto her bracelet all that time. Logan's first day back at Westfield Middle was both awkward and liberating. He walked through the halls, noticing new faces, older teachers, some staff he recognized. A few kids stared. A few whispered. But most were focused on their own lives. He found that a friend he used to have, Jake Thompson, was still there, though now in the 8th grade. They struck up a conversation, halting and uncertain at first, but it warmed quickly into the old camaraderie they shared. Over lunch, Martin caught a glimpse of Logan in the cafeteria, quietly chatting with a small group of students. The boy still wore an air of caution, but Martin could see the tension had lifted from his shoulders. Justice hadn't been swift or easy, and scars remained, but the truth had come to light. Logan was no longer bearing it alone. As for Martin, one crisp afternoon a week later, he was locking up after the last of the faculty had gone home. He walked through the same side hallway door that Logan once used to sneak in. The memory of that night came flooding back. This time, though, Martin felt a sense of closure. He paused outside classroom 3B, peering in through the window at the rows of empty desks. 2 years ago, that single desk had hidden Logan's quiet plea for the truth, scrawled in crayon form. Now it stood among the others, just a normal piece of furniture again. He let out a small sigh of relief and moved on. The corridors were once more calm, the hum of fluorescent lights a comforting backdrop. The boy who'd been told to keep quiet had finally been heard. The final resolution came in a board meeting about a month later. Dr. Felton read an official statement acknowledging the wrongful expulsion, praising Logan's courage for coming forward, and announcing that the father who had once wielded so much influence had voluntarily resigned from any remaining district advisory positions. Rumor had it that Mr. Pierce was selling his properties and considering a move to another state, perhaps to escape the disgrace. Ryan was to face juvenile proceedings. Details remained confidential, but word was that he'd likely be placed on some form of probation and ordered to undergo counseling, possibly community service for assault or reckless endangerment. When Ms. Crawford asked Martin if he'd seen Logan around after the board's announcement, Martin grinned. "Yeah, he was just sitting outside the school this morning," Martin said. "Not trying to break in, just sitting there like he was making peace with it." Soon enough, Martin found the boy exactly as described, on the front steps, watching as students filed into the building. Martin approached, hands in his pockets. "Everything all right?" Logan stood, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Yeah, I just wanted to see if it's really mine again. If I can just be a normal student." Martin glanced at the school's facade. "It's more than okay, kid. It's your school and you belong here." Logan smiled, a genuine, bright expression that reminded Martin of the polite boy he'd once known. "Thanks," he said. "For everything." Martin tipped his baseball cap. "You did most of the heavy lifting. I just turned on a flashlight." With that, Logan headed inside to join the other students, disappearing into the noise and bustle of changing classes. Martin stood for a moment longer, appreciating the fleeting sense of justice that had finally taken hold. The building was no longer silent and foreboding. It was once again a place of learning and growth for a boy who deserved a chance at normalcy. Maybe now, with the truth finally revealed, Logan could have that chance. Life moved on. There were new seasons, new school events. Dr. Felton busied himself with efforts to restore public trust. Ms. Crawford oversaw additional training for staff on handling assault accusations and maintaining unbiased investigations. Bethany found a small measure of closure, though she continued therapy to help her overcome the trauma. Damien, ostracized by some peers, quietly sought redemption by volunteering at local community events, hoping to distance himself from his old silence. Yet the thread connecting them all was that single night when Martin Holt found Logan placing a small drawing and a bracelet in an old desk. The memory of that moment was enough to remind them that a single action, whether a pulled fire alarm or a quiet confession, could ripple through time and affect countless lives. In the end, Logan walked the halls of Westfield not as a pariah, but as a student among many. He was quieter than some, occasionally haunted by memories. But when he passed Martin in the hallway or caught sight of Dr. Felton in the cafeteria, he felt a surge of gratitude that someone had finally bothered to look deeper. The truth had come out, and it had set him free from a burden he'd carried for too long. After a final wave of administrative paperwork, Logan's transcripts were corrected, his record cleared, and an apology letter was issued to him. The girl he tried to protect sent him a message: "Thank you for pulling that alarm. You probably saved me from something worse. I'm sorry you paid such a high price." To that, Logan replied simply, "You're safe. That's all that matters." In the quiet after the storm, as the community began to settle into a new normal, Martin found himself reflecting on it all one evening while shutting down the lights. The corridors were empty, the overhead fluorescent glow illuminating the polished floors. He paused at the office door, thinking about how the entire conflict had started with one triggered alarm on a random night. So much had been hidden behind closed doors and old grudges. But in the end, the truth had emerged, a testament to how secrets can't stay buried forever, not when courage, however small, steps forward to shine a light. Thank you for watching. If you believe the truth should always prevail, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories. Have a wonderful evening wherever you are.